also doctors dictate when certain patients come in for testing.
Sorry.
So our approach to trying to fix their wait time problem was to first look at the overall process of outpatient services, to also look at a floor plan, see if there was any way to restructure things and reduce transportation, to look at staffing, make sure that there was no wasted labor, and to look at arrival rates of the patients and also the service times of specific tests, hoping to accomplish a general goal that 95% of the patients seen by the laboratory experience wait times less than 15 minutes. So the first thing that we did in starting to understand our problem that we had was to speak with management and the technicians working in the laboratory. So April and Jeannie are the two managers, Jeannie specifically working in the laboratory department, and then 3 technicians, 2 of which are full-time, 1 of which is part-time. And as you can see in the graph, at any time during a day, you'll have between 1, 2, or 3 technicians. So the next thing that we did was then to look at the overall process, which Kyle will discuss for you.
Yeah. One of the good things we did early on to get really connected with the people and procedures that are involved in the entire process was walk through it from beginning to end. And as you can see, there are 3 major processes: the sign-in, registration, and once you're into the lab. But intermittently, there are 3 separate waiting areas, which are some cause for concern moving forward. This is what you see as you walk into the lab. There are 3 chairs, 2 of them against the back wall, and then a 3rd one around the corner. 2 waiting chairs, which we aim to eliminate. There are 2 separate computer terminals where technicians enter in patient orders, and they have to do this manually for each patient. It's not a separate task. As you can see, it's pretty crowded there, and also some patients undergo EKGs, which is just a small room inside the lab. And this is a flow chart of it. What we're really going to be looking at is this red block over here, which is when the technicians process patient orders on the computer.
The characteristics of typical patients impacts the process. Generally, the patients seen by the lab are older and they have mobility issues due to their weight. The chart on the bottom shows the breakdown of patients by category, and it doesn't add up to 100% because normally the patients come in from more than one area. And there are 4 main tests done by the lab: urine, EKG, blood work for adults, and newborn screening, which is blood work for infants. We didn't calculate a service time for a urine test because the technician isn't involved in that. And the average wait time as calculated by Methodist, by the lab department, is 18 minutes, and Kyle's going to explain how and why this is inaccurate.
Okay, well, this is supposed to be a Gantt chart. I guess Windows doesn't like the formatting of it. But the big block in the middle is a aggregation of all of that. We broke down all the tasks, no matter what type of procedure the patient was receiving, into how the patient was spending their time in there, whether the technician was doing administrative work on the computer, whether they were waiting, or if they were actually working on the patient. And we found out that a lot of the time, an excessive amount of time is spent where the patient is simply idle or the technician is working on the computer and not tending to the patient. And this is just all the observations that I did in the lab over a month. This is the aggregation of it. As you can see, the 4 categories. 60% are devoted to administrative time and wait time, so we can approach those and aim to reduce them. They're going to be able to drastically improve their service.
Okay, from viewing the process at a high-level view, we notice a few inefficiencies right off the bat. First off, the administrative and computer work created a huge bottleneck in the process and disrupted the flow. And also, there were unpredictable and sporadic periods of patient arrivals from the lab's just straight walk-in policy.
Okay, again, I'm sorry that this doesn't work right here, but what you're supposed to be able to see from this graph is the rows 2, 3, and 4 are computer entry, verify order, and computer entry again. This one particular patient had a complex order that the technician had trouble entering. And when that happened, they had to go out into the hospital, find the doctor, and confirm the order with them before proceeding. So that's a 30-minute period right there where that technician is out of commission and the patient is simply idle taking up his spot, and nothing is being accomplished, which stalls the entire process. And also, some issues in outpatient services record keeping. They record their wait time as stopping when patients are brought into the lab, but as we showed earlier, there are 2 waiting chairs in there, which they don't factor into their wait time, which affects what their perceptions of their service rate are. And also there's a significant amount of waiting due to administrative tasks while the patient is being serviced.
Okay, so from observing the process and analyzing the data that we collected, we've come up with 3 proposed solutions. The first one, and by far the most pertinent because we think it'll have the biggest impact on the lab process, is to separate the administrative function from the lab function so that they can run in parallel with each other and I guess create more of a streamlined process. And this diagram the dotted line shows this new separated administrative function. And the process that we're proposing should be modeled after the process that actually the outpatient radiology lab does. It's right across the hall from the lab department. And they have similar capacities and they experience much shorter wait times. And this shows the administrative desk that serves as order processing and as an information point for patients. So this results in heightened customer satisfaction. Our second recommendation is to allow for a percentage of total patient appointments to be scheduled versus only walk-ins. And this will mainly be for tests with longer service times. And the lab should utilize the scheduling department within Methodist Dallas Medical Center to make appointments, and it'll be strictly for staffing and planning purposes. And these graphs show the patient distribution by day and by hour. And you can see by looking at this how scheduling will smooth out these fluctuations. And our final recommendation kind of goes hand in hand with our first recommendation of separating the administrative function, in that we suggest they should get rid of the third waiting area, chair 4 and 5 that Kyle was talking about, as these chairs only distort the data, crowds the room, and frustrates patients by having to wait a third time. And now Emily is going to talk a little bit on our calculations and findings.
So to confirm the recommendations that we have, we decided to use some queuing theory, which I took a class last semester, and so bear with me as I try and explain a semester's worth of information to you in a matter of seconds. But the distribution that we decided to use was a Poisson distribution, which models random events occurring, but coming from a memory-less process, which means one single event occurring is not influenced by a previous event or future events. So someone observing a Poisson process would observe a number of things occurring during a specific amount of time. So for us, we were watching the patients that arrived in a given hour. And using this Poisson process is going to be the best for us because it gives a worst case scenario. And so some numbers that we had to calculate to do any of the equations were the arrival rates and the service rates. So here you can see a graph of the average number of patients per hour, and then from that hourly breakdown, we got an average number of patients per day. So you can see that there were 4.33 patients per hour. And given under their current system and their outpatient logs, which are inaccurate as Kyle had described, they can only see 2.58 patients per hour, and clearly you can see that this is a problem because patients are arriving at about 4, they're only servicing 2, you're going to have half the patients not serviced, but clearly that doesn't happen. So that just, again, reaffirms that there's inaccuracies in the data. But under our new recommendation of having an administrative staffer, we believe that the service rate should be 8.51 patients per hour. So here it's the reverse. Instead of 2 patients not being serviced, they're going to be able to service double the amount that are actually arriving. So if you see, these are some calculations that we did. The first being the current, the first column being the current, the second being the proposed, with different numbers of servers. So 1 server, 2, or 3 being the number of technicians. But under our new recommendation of having this administrative staffer, they won't be able to have 3 servers because that 1 server will be utilized by actually doing that administrative work. And also, you can see in the first column how having that arrival rate greater than the service rate comes up with a utilization rate greater than 1, which influenced which influenced the equations. But even though this column is inaccurate, I put it in there just to show. So some things that we calculated was the utilization rate, the probability that a patient would not have to wait, the expected length of the queue, so the number of patients waiting, the wait time of the queue, and the probability that a patient would have to wait less than 15 minutes, which is the threshold that Methodist was hoping to achieve. So to leave Methodist, we wanted to come up with some implementation guidelines for this administrative process. We didn't want to just tell them, go ahead, do this, without actually telling them how to do that. So first and foremost, we think that management needs to meet with registration and understand registration's processes so that they actually implement what we're recommending. We also need to speak with the scheduling department and tack on the lab department into that scheduling so that patients can be scheduled for EKGs and newborn screenings. We also need to establish that administrative lab desk out in the patient wait area. We think that it should be there because then, just as with the registration department, your patients are going to get added customer satisfaction by seeing their order being processed, by knowing that something's happening. And they also have a contact point to say, hey, how much longer do I have to wait? You know, where's my order in this line? We also need to communicate specifically to the technicians that this administrative role is in no way a demotion. It's just strictly designating roles and tasks, nothing more. We even proposed that the technicians be rotated through the administrative position so that on one day, one technician does the administrative, then the next day they're doing lab work. So that way they stay up on their skills and things like that. This does not require any additional training to the technicians because they already know how to use the software, but now whoever's designated to that role is just going to become more efficient in the processes. Also, the responsibilities for that administrative person is to do the order checking in parallel while the patient's waiting, to print the patient file, get it ready for the technician so that they can immediately begin testing, to answer any patient questions, give that customer satisfaction, and during any lull times, maybe do some inventory filling, things like that. But really, this position is most necessary during their peak times. So during lulls, this administrative role may not even need to be functioning. So they could go back and be in the lab and actually do that lab testing, added another server to that process. Okay, so those are our guidelines for implementing this. And we believe that this will definitely decrease Methodist's patient wait times. If you have any questions?
Just before we wrap up, one thing that we think really is going to help solidify our recommendations is that a department that operates basically the same sort of procedures as outpatient services, the radiology department, they currently operate in a system similar to what we're recommending. And speaking with the radiology department, they were kind of surprised that with the volume of patients that outpatient sees that they don't operate something similar to their procedures, these administrative and laboratory functions running in parallel. So hopefully they listen.